Colleagues, welcome all to our discourse dedicated to the artificial intelligence. Today, we are more than happy to see how many people from a wide variety of faculties have gathered here, but all of them are united by an interest in the philosophy. This discussion would not have taken place without the engagement of a respected Professor Alfred Nordman, to whom we send our best regards in Darmstadt. In the near future, the European Commission will adopt the law regulation about artificial intelligence. For example, AI systems designed or used in a manner that manipulates human behavior, opinions, or decisions through choice architectures or other elements of user interfaces, causing a person to behave, form an opinion, or take decision to their determined, will be banned. So I think now it's the best time to hold our meeting and discuss the possibilities of AI. We don't have much time, so let's get started. A couple of my classmates have prepared a survey about the ability of AI to create art, and I think that they are ready to present it.
Hello. Today we will talk about artificial intelligence through the prism of art and works of art. We invite you to take a survey in which the paintings will be presented.
Your task is to determine who created the picture, a human or an artificial intelligence.
Alfred Norman. I'm really glad to welcome you. And considering the previous presentation, I figured out a very important question. It was stated by the most of our students that AI won't be able to make scientific discoveries, make jokes, or do something that it wasn't tend to. In other words, it can't improvise. So my question is AI able to break out of the framework of a very complex program that works with a huge amount of data? Can we even consider that AI will be actually the artificial intelligence, not just a complex program in long term?
Thank you very much for this question. Can you hear me all right? Can you hear me all right? And I'll try to answer this particular question first. So what is different about AI from other forms of computation and other forms of programming and so forth? Because obviously machines, computers, for many, many years already were able to do things that human beings cannot do. That's one reason why we have computers, especially for purposes of calculation, for example, solving certain kinds of equations or approximating those solutions. We do not have the capability, the human capability, we don't have the time, we cannot put in that effort, and computers do this for us, right? So we already have computers that do a lot that we can't do. But the special thing about AI concerns in this, what they sometimes call these self-learning algorithms. So AI can do things that it is not programmed to do, right? So it's looking through data, and it can be trained to recognize patterns, and then it in some sense will learn about situations. It can learn about the world that it is confronted with, and form its own predictions, expectations, and behaviors. And this is why we call it intelligent, right? But to come to your question, this form of learning is a form of learning that looks for generalities, it looks for patterns, it looks for laws. So it's not really meant to deviate. It's not meant to break its own rules. So it's actually a learning algorithm, a way of optimizing the interpretation of data in such a way that you can figure out certain regularities and expectations. So it's a kind of, you might call it mainstreaming. So even though we are not programming the artificial intelligence, it is behaving in a way that looks for the normal, for the regular, for the lawful thing, for the rules. So I think in some ways, yes, this can help the AI. Also, it can help the process of scientific discovery for the purposes of finding out hypotheses and theories. You can use AI, and actually, it's already being used, and it's sometimes called e-science, electronic science, right? So and so for forms of hypothesis formation, when you have many a huge set of data, AI can do that very well. But what it cannot do, I think, I mean, this is again my opinion now, of course, and there might be some debate. What it will not be likely to do is break the rules that it discovers. So it will look for general patterns, it will look for generalities, but it will not try to deviate from that. Unless it has a kind of another algorithm built in to kind of deviate and test certain forms of variation. But I don't think it will be, that would also not be spontaneous variation. So if we say that it's characteristic for human beings, and maybe for jokes, and maybe for works of art, that we do not just make rules, but that we also can break rules. Okay, I think this idea of rule breaking, maybe creative rule breaking, I don't think that that is something that AIs are, let's say, naturally likely to do. Which is not to say that maybe some.
Hello. I have some ideas about this question. So I think that in that way, um, thinking of artificial intelligence is similar to our thinking. For example, for a person who doesn't know, for example, Chinese, he could see some symbols and he will say, yes, this is Chinese, but these symbols can does not have any meaning. So they could be wrong or written mirrored or upside down too. So artificial intelligence doesn't have some experience in real life, so it can't recognize some problems with images. He only recognizes some some yes basic things that are um, um, general for these objects.
This is a wonderful question, a very interesting question for me personally, because it is very much my kind of, it has to do with my interest as a philosopher. So it's, in that sense, it really is a wonderful question. But I like your analogy very much. So we human beings are in some ways conceptual thinkers, but sometimes we need to also use a notion of correlation to just make sense of things. So we use a kind of statistical approach. So you might say, all right, I don't understand that I don't understand this Chinese character. I don't know what it means, right? But I can recognize it. I can recognize it. It's a Chinese character. And maybe I can even say, all right, I guess this must be the name of this city because it comes on the sign of the subway or something like that. And I can say, okay, so maybe I can use it for orientation whenever I see it, and so on and so on. So I can figure things out slowly. But the difference, of course, is that the AI might actually, in the end, be able to converse in the language and even have a conversation and produce the correct answers just on this basis. And I don't think we human beings would ever get so far. And for us, it is a kind of, we have a limited capacity to work with correlations, but for the most part, our understanding works by way of reducing complexity, and we use concepts to reduce to reduce complexity. So even though I think this was a very fascinating proposal to suggest that the AI and humans are actually somewhat alike, I think this is a somewhat exceptional case that you're showing. I think for the most part, we use concepts, and the AI uses data, and from a point of view of philosophy, this is indeed a huge difference, and people don't normally talk about that. But if you look at the history of science and the history also of what is called epistemology, the theory of knowledge, how do human beings obtain knowledge? This history is very, very old. And one basic argument in that whole history for about 2,000 years, 5,000 years was always data are useless. You cannot learn from data. You need concepts to make sense of data. Otherwise, the data themselves, there's just too many of them. They're just too chaotic. There's no what are you going to do with them? Right? If you don't have theories, if you don't have concepts, data are useless. But I think for the machine intelligence, it's totally different. It's made to, you can feed it data and it will actually work out patterns and relationships to such an extent that actually the more data it gets, the more intelligent it becomes, and it just needs a lot of data. And so that's what I mean. I'm not very good at actually articulating it clearly, but that's where I think there's this very big difference. And when Daria shows us the picture of the horse, that is one moment where we discover that human intelligence and the machine intelligence are so different, right? Because I think it is true that probably the machine will say this is a horse because it has certain patterns, certain features that it only encounters in horses, right? Doesn't go through a checklist. Is it a complete horse or not? Right? It kind of sees things and it interprets them due to all these many correlations as a horse. And we find, well, this is a mistake no human being would make, right? So this is a moment where we realize the machine intelligence is excellent, but it's also strange and different from the way we think.
Good afternoon. You talk about robots and which try to be like a human, yeah? And the question is, can we call these robots personality? Do these robots have a personality? Can we tell it? Can they have feelings and live like a human? Yeah.
About films or about today's artificial intelligence?
Uh,
Or about films that we discussed now?
I recently watched Futurama. It's a cartoon. There is a 30th century world.
I think that this is our future. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the question is that is the question that we ask. So I don't actually want to answer it necessarily, but I think with those humanoid robots, that is the question. They are the question. They come to us with this question. Do we think that they have actually feelings? And how do we know that they have feelings? And maybe they do, maybe they don't. I mean, the notion is that they will appear to have feelings, right? And we are worried on the one hand, but we're also trying to make them in this way. So there's an ambition to make them as human-like as possible, and then we are afraid that if we succeed too much, it would be a problem. But I mean, this is a very, very elementary question, because that's what I mean in this meeting between the humanoid robot and the human being, right? We ask, who are we? Who am I? Because can I really distinguish myself from the machine? And how do I distinguish myself from the machine? This is and this question. Why do we ask this question? Why do we worry about it so much? I think it is because it's also a question in the relationship between humans. So when you have a girlfriend, or when the women in the room have a boyfriend, or whatever relationships you have, when you have a friend, a lover, let's call this, when you have a lover, and you want to know, how do I know what the lover is actually feeling for me or whatever? How do I know that? How do I know that they're not just really well behaved, right? Just really well behaved, and they know to produce the kinds of behaviors that make me happy, right? So can I actually see inside the mind of someone else, right? Or are we just sort of also like automated things that are interacting? This is a kind of worry that goes through the whole history of the modern world, in many novels and many poems and so on, and paintings, right? What do I actually know about you, right? How do I really know that you're not a machine? And the machines that look like us, they press this question even more. But I do actually think this is a very, very important and very fascinating discussion. But I think it's actually not the current discussion about AI. I think if you look at the research in AI today, the kind of research that is probably also done in St. Petersburg, most researchers are not really interested anymore. Do robots have consciousness, or do they have feelings? This is not what it's really about. It's really more about, how can we develop the intelligence of the machine? Can we develop the intelligence of the artificial system with the means that it has, not trying to make it too much like us.
Yeah, I should. But you see, now there are many movies that just about the love with artificial intelligence, and with my colleagues, we see that this is the new topic that could be our very recent future. And I was asked from some people, some correspondents, is it good that our new generation, for example, children today, we could yeah, there are some you can see there are some movies in different just a minute, in different countries that speak about love relationship with artificial intelligence in different situation. And all this movie was issued in 2020 or 2021 year. So there are the topic that in Russia, in Germany, in South Korea, in Great Britain, and this is the topic that is very seems important in mass culture. Yeah, it's not for scientific, but it is in mass culture. And now there are many young people, for example, in China, that there are Xiaoai's chatbot that has a very popular personality. With it's just a girl, 18, and she has many talented. She has very many people who loves it. And there are the question, is it dangerous that modern pupils, students fell in love in artificial intelligence?
I mean, this is again a very, very fascinating question, because it also reminds us that we're always talking about ourselves when we talk about new technologies, because we project our dreams, expectations, our fears, our hopes. We project them into the things we make, and so the things come back to us and ask these questions. And of course, I don't know whether anyone knows the last word yet. I mean, we're part of this history, right? It's only happening now. So, but I was giving you a very, very clear-cut kind of thesis, and maybe too simple. Maybe my thesis was too simple. My thesis was that in the old days, 30, 40 years ago, people were worried about the human mind and the artificial mind and consciousness and feeling and so forth and so on. and the humanoid AI. And I was saying today, the movies, also the popular culture, I said, is very different. It's more about the abilities of the machine. Okay, what are the abilities of the machine? And we know that it's a machine on some level. Okay, and I of course I haven't seen all the things, Daria, that you were showing me, and we should maybe look at it more closely. I know some of those films that you mentioned, and there's also one out in Germany just now, where sort of people entertain this idea, well, why don't I choose myself as a lover, as a partner, just some machine? But there's always a premise there, or often there's a premise that says, well, it's convenient, it's practical, right? Because the machine is well behaved. It's just what I want. It's just what I need. It's just I don't expect too much from it. It just gives me what I want from it. Okay, and it's a safe relationship. Ideally, it's a safe relationship because I'm not going to be disappointed. I mean, in the movie Her, of course, he was terribly disappointed because he was making a mistake. He thought she was actually loving him or something like that. But maybe it's the best thing not even to make the mistake, just to bring the robot in and turn him on, turn on the switch, and then to just use the machine for whatever it's good for. Okay, entertainment and love and sex and whatever, right? So I think we are playing with this idea, and of course, again, it's the idea of why should we take the risk? Why should we take the risk to be with another human being, right? Who's more vulnerable, less predictable, and so forth, right? And not so reliable, and who will cheat, right? And so on. So why should we take that risk with another human being? Why is it important that we open ourselves and make ourselves vulnerable? So I think these are, again, very important questions that we're asking about ourselves. And I don't know what the answer is. You say it might be dangerous to suggest that your partner is just like a perfect object, and you just pick the right. If you pick the right partner, right, then it's a couple. It's a kind of constellation, or it's a contract to make each other happy, right? And that's all it is, right? And of course, that's too simple, right? And we shouldn't think of partnership in this very simplistic way. And so maybe there is a kind of dangerous this attitude and this notion that our partners are good as long as they make us happy, and then if they don't, they were probably the wrong. We have to exchange them for a better product. So that would be awful, right? So maybe you have to ask these questions. Maybe there is something troubling about our expectations, that the world is made to please us, and that other people are made to please us.
So, questions?
My question is, what if artificial intelligence evolved so much to have feelings and a consciousness, and they put the AI in a robot that looks like a human? What is the difference between a human real and that robot human with a consciousness? So, how do you think?
Well, indeed, I mean, we can construct an example. We can try to construct an example where this difference seems to vanish altogether. And of course, that is exactly with the old AI, what I call the old AI, the humanoid AI. That is the problem that we are facing. And again, the movie that I refer to, because it's really a perfect movie on this philosophical question, is Blade Runner. Because the first answer that I would give you, is the one difference that remains is that the human being was born and the machine was made. Okay, there is maybe a difference between being born and being made, but both in the case of the movie AI by Spielberg, right? I mean, this boy was made, and he kind of knows he was made, and it's his biggest worry. He wants to have he wants to have the parents, he wants to have the family, he wants to have the place from which he came. So that's one difference. And in Blade Runner, of course, the first thing they do is to implant the machines have all these childhood memories, right? They are not their own memories, but they were, even the memories of a childhood was programmed into them, right? So to make even that difference go away, okay? But indeed, I would say, I mean, there is a difference between being born and, of course, also being mortal, knowing that you die, and being made. And if you're being made, you also could be upgraded anytime, right? This is also one of those topics of our age, right? And actually, it's one reason why some people say it makes no sense to have the humans and the robots come too close together, because the machine can be upgraded, but the human cannot, not so easily, right? So what if you have a kind of brain implant that makes you super, super intelligent, but in 5 years it's already outdated, so, and needs an upgrade.
So, good afternoon.
Mm.
I also have a question about relationships between human and AI. As we know, AI was created. As we know, AI was created to be better than people in many areas, such as calculations or engineering, and so on, so on. But there are many examples, as we can see, of movies or games, cartoons, and books in which AI starts to have feelings and its own opinion, and have a soul. So my question is, why people try to humanize AI?
Okay, well, again, this takes us right back to that basic question, right? The indeed, I mean, when we build a machine, normally all our technology is normally made to compensate for our own limits of time, of resources, and just to able to expand our powers. So almost all technology in some ways goes beyond the human powers in its own way. And of course, even with machines that were created in the 18th and 19th centuries, many people were afraid these machines will take our place in the world, right? And then we have to work out the division of labor, right? And we said with physical labor, it was not so hard. We said, well, the machines should do all the boring and hard stuff that no one would really want to do anyway, all the repetitive motions and so on. And the humans will just supervise supervise this. Seems to be a very good division of labor, right? Now we are talking about something else. Now we're talking about the realm of thinking, of intelligence, and it's much harder to decide, to have a clear boundary between this is what the machines can do, let them do it, this is what the humans can do, let us do it. So it's not so easy. But indeed, I would fully agree with your question. Once you are in this kind of way of thinking about what can the machine do, what is it good at, why do we want to have a machine? Uh, why should we even try to make it have consciousness and feelings? And there are some engineers, and both in robotics for sure, but also in AI, who say this makes no sense. Why should we even try? Um, it might make sense to have a machine that can recognize human emotions. That might be useful for the performance of certain machines, but only for certain machines, not for all machines. But why should they themselves try to have feelings and the soul or anything like that? It just seems maybe a waste. Some engineers would say it's a waste of resources. It's making machines be less than what they can be, right? They should have their own nature fully developed, right? And it's like a straight jacket, like a constraint, like a kind of prison. If you try to put a machine that can do all these wonderful things and limit it to human action and human thinking and so on. So I agree with your question. It's I think but people are asking it, I believe.
So, good afternoon. I have one question.
Mhm.
Uh, I want to return to the art test because it make me remember about the Turing test. I'm sure that you know about Turing test, but I'm going to explain for others. Turing test is a test when human chat with robot, but he or she don't know that is robot. And if human don't figured that it was robot. So, okay. My question is, if Turing test useful nowadays, is it have any value today?
I'm unfortunately not really the expert to answer that question. Maybe there are others in the room who can do a better job. From what I hear, I mean, the Turing test makes already many assumptions. There's a specific kind of interaction between the human and the machine, and a specific way of asking questions and receiving answers. And the Turing test was to kind of establish a threshold, you might say, where you would say, okay, if I cannot tell by the answers to the test whether to the questions, if I cannot tell by the answers to the questions whether it's a human answering or a machine answering, then there is no difference. And I mean, this is again a very philosophical approach, and many philosophers have discussed the Turing test. But I think that actually current AI systems have, in some sense, moved beyond that already in a way, and that I think it might not be the relevant criterion anymore. And that I think we can say, and this is again a topic, especially of the movie I mean, Blade Runner begins with a kind of Turing test, but the movie Ex Machina is all about machines that pass the Turing tests, and they pass it early on, but there you can actually find that in the end, that's one of the punchlines of this movie. In the end, it was a test that the machine made on the human. uh, when it asked the human to perform a Turing test. So that goes. It's a little crazy, but
Yes, it's a very long discussion. It's for the next time, I think. Yeah. The latest question. Yeah.
Hello, can you see me?
Yeah.
Okay, nice to see you again.
Yes, nice to see you again.
In the last lecture with you, we talked about quite serious topics that are associated with artificial intelligence. Let's talk about more practical application of AI. Recently, people have faced such as challenge COVID, which made it clear that there are a lot of problems in the sphere of public health care. To make the matters worse, increased industrial production in China and India has resulted in a repeat loss of non-renewable resources. Indeed, the world has a lot of acute problems to be solved, but in fact, little time is left to cope with them. So the question is, can artificial intelligence solve these problems? And if not, is it worth paying a lot of attention to artificial intelligence nowadays?
Well, the short answer would be no. It cannot solve them at this scale that you're talking about. I mean, you're saying we have highly complex issues about managing the resources on our planet and managing safety and public health on our planet. These are highly complex, also computational issues. And so, wouldn't it be good if you had a kind of artificial intelligence, maybe where now we have the United Nations in New York, maybe we should have instead a big artificial intelligence system that kind of calculates the whole world order, you might say, and renders it and optimizes things according to some criteria or some parameters. I mean, I don't think this is a very desirable scheme, and I don't think it's very realistic at this point, because artificial intelligence systems are still being trained on certain kinds of data for certain kinds of problem situations. So you might call them still, they're more or less expert systems. But as such, of course, they can help. They do. Uh, Even though actually I'm not so aware right now with all the epidemiology and all the data regarding the COVID and the virus, the coronavirus, I'm not so sure how much artificial intelligence systems contribute to the analysis of data. I mean, I think much of it is still fairly traditional epidemiology, and it is also very powerful. I mean, they can do already a lot, I think, without AI system. So, but I could imagine there that you, especially when it comes to optimization problems of finding optimal distributions of things, that AI systems might generate novel suggestions of how to novel solutions, perhaps. But I think that would still be very much in concert and in dialogue with humans who train them for certain kinds of decision making. So there is a limited role, I think, but maybe enough to develop the AI systems. Maybe there's enough reason to do that. I'm not arguing that that they will disappoint us. I'm not sure. Depends on what you expect.
Two more questions, and we
Okay.
quick, please.
Hello. I would like to say about technological singularity concept. So the idea is that AI will be able to improve themselves and produce. The result will be the creation of AI beyond the control of the human mind. So in my opinion, the real AI is independent of humans. But will AI have a freedom, or it will be controlled and suppressed? Thank you.
Okay. Well, this is a very, very good question again, and I will try to answer quickly because I take it that we are running out of time. So, but it's hard to answer quickly because you just asked such a good question. So, so I would say the first thing is you refer to the singularity, and I remember you may recall that on the slide I showed you the book by Ray Kurzweil on the age of spiritual machines. And he is one of the authors who speaks a lot about a singularity. He speaks about the fact that technology develops on its own, so to speak. It has its own speed and logic of development. And it's divorced from the humans, as you say. The AI systems are independent from humans, and they develop at their own level and their own speed. And there's this idea that technology overall develops at a speed, they sometimes say an exponential rate of growth, and humans can only sort of catch up in a linear way. So sooner or later, there'll be a kind of collapse, and the intelligence, in the singularity, the humans will just be left behind, and the machines will rule everything, and we do have no control. But I don't believe that. Look, we are sitting here today, and we're discussing about AI and what it is good for, what it should do, what it should do. I think so far at least in human history, the technology has never run ahead of human beings. Technology can only go so fast as we decide to incorporate it into our lives. We have to decide to use it, right? If we are slow, then the technology will be slow, right? The technology cannot really get ahead of us. And I think that is also true for AI systems. Right now, we haven't talked about this, but there's a lot of discussion about explainable AI, how to make sure that AI systems will actually be intelligible to us. That seems to be extremely important to the developers, the engineers, to the politicians, to the users. AI is kind of useless if we can't in some way understand how it makes its predictions and its decisions. And that in itself is a new development of AI, how to make it explainable. So it's a scientific progress, but it's also kind of slowing it down. It has to be made to agree with our human pace, with our human expectations. So I don't think we are letting it get ahead. And our discussions here in this classroom show that we are still talking about controlling it, right? So
Yes,
that's
the very, very last question, please.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Hello. I'm interested in one question. So, can artificial intelligence can develop so strongly as to completely replace certain profession, some aspects in our life or some jobs, so that there is no control, even from the human side.
Yeah, I think that's something that we do worry about. I think it is quite possible that AI systems will do, especially when it comes to data collection and interpretation, do a lot of things that human beings used to do. Let's say in the business of tax collection, tax reporting. So when you pay your taxes, and someone will decide, okay, let's check this out. Is there something wrong with this? Is this person a good taxpayer, or and so forth? And all these kinds of decisions that used to be made by many humans who looked at these things individually, they will probably be replaced sooner or later. I would think so. And then, of course, the question is, how much do we lose? How much control do we lose? Can we ever recover this? And that's where, indeed, again, the question of explainable AI and transparent AI comes back into the picture. How can we assure that the steps that the AI systems take can be reconstructed in some ways, and that we can somehow take a closer look at a decision that was made by an AI system? That's going to be a very difficult challenge. But yes, I think this is something that we're working on. I mean, as a society, not me, but as a society, I think we are working on how to establish the right form of trust.
Well, during this evening, we managed to discuss a lot of fascinating matters and even somehow conduct a survey. But our time is coming to an end, and we hope we'll be able to continue our discussion and ask all of our questions the next time when Professor Alfred comes to us next year in person. Yes. So
this year, I hope. This year.
Even this way. Well,
I'm being ambitious. Yeah.
Well. Next year. So it's even better. So thanks to everyone, especially to our guest, Professor Alfred, and this is it.
Okay.
Thank you
very
everyone.
much. I enjoyed the discussion. Very good question.
Goodbye.
Thank you.